Hello and welcome to Earth Trifle. Well, if you're like me and you're interested in global warming, because we should all be interested in global warming because it doesn't just affect us today, it affects us in the future. And as a result, you're probably interested in the weather. I'm not talking about the little stick-on clouds by the weatherman, no. I'm talking about the actual weather. Well, this article I've got here is by Jonathan Amos. He's a science correspondent, and this is in the BBC News. Super cold thunderstorm sets temperature record. We've all seen those majestic anvil storm clouds that form on hot summer's day. But what do you think is the temperature right at the very top? Well, it's very cold. Obviously, at high altitude, it is well below freezing. But would you be surprised to learn that sometimes it is even below minus 100? Now that is blistering cold and you won't survive long. In fact, you'd probably die within seconds. Indeed, scientists have just published research showing the top of one tropical storm cloud system in 2018 reached minus 111. This is very likely a record low temperature. Now, we're seeing a lot of anomalies at the moment with global warming, aren't we? It was seen on the 29th of December last year, just south of the equator in the Western Pacific. The measurement was made by passing American satellite NOAA 20. When a powerful upward draft reaches the top of the lower atmosphere or troposphere, it will normally flatten and spread out to form the classic anvil shape, as you can see in this picture here. But if the storm is very energetic, the upward movement of the air can punch through the troposphere ceiling, the tropospores, to keep on rising into the stratosphere. There's lots of pauses and fears here. The next layer up into the atmosphere. In the In the 2018 event, the cloud top was about 20.5 kilometers in altitude. Record low temperatures were detected in the thunderstorm, as depicted here in this image. You can see all these warm areas, which is where it's red, but as you can see, the bright blue areas in the middle here are literally very, very cold. Just there. It's called an overshooting top, explains Dr. Simon Proud, a NERC research fellow in satellite remote sensing at National Centre for Earth Observation and Oxford University, UK. Overshooting tops are reasonably common. We get them over the UK as well, sometimes like last August when we had a number of massive storms, but this was a very big overshoot. Normally, an overshooting top cools to about 7 degrees for about every kilometre it goes above the tropospheres, and this one was about 13 to 14 degrees cooler than the tropospheres. So a pretty big overshoot, the scientist told the BBC News. As you can see here. Well, an example of an overshooting top. See the area of unevenness bursting through the flat surface? Well, that's where it's really, really cold. Dr. Proud and Scott Bashmeyer, a research meteorologist at the University of Wisconsin, Madison, US, report the event in a paper in the Journal of Geophysical Research Letters. They describe the contributing factors. Although big storms in that part of the Pacific are frequent around December and January timeframe, this one seemed to get an extra boost. In part, this came from some very warm ocean water in the region, but there was help too from a phenomenon meteorologists refer to as the Madden-Julian oscillation. The MJO is an eastwards moving zone of winds that can accentuate wet and dry weather. What's noteworthy, however, is the hint in long-term data that these super cold thunderstorms may be increasing in frequency. This is where the concern is. There have been as many such events across the globe in the past 3 years as there were in 13 years before that. That's relevant as, in general, the colder the storm, the more likely it is to produce hazardous weather, such as lightning and, flooding. The storm we report on was in the middle of nowhere. And just as well, says Dr. Proud. If you'd been there, you'd have got drenched and very probably a load of hail on your head as well. And a lot of lightning. Now, some of these places, we live in France here, and hail here is sometimes as big as golf balls. Ironically, our insurance broker here in the Limousin, well, his car got pounded, and it looked like a golf ball at the end. That it did. It was dimpled all over. This is obviously a real concern, because the reason for these big hailstones is because the temperatures are colder for longer. Over the last 20 years, it seems these super cold thunderstorms are becoming a little bit more common. It's interesting that in this part of the world, the troposphere is actually getting warmer. So we might expect to see warmer clouds, not colder clouds, which likely means we're seeing more extreme storms. Now, never mind Donald Trump, because we know about Donald Trump.
Like you'll go person, woman, man, camera, TV.
This is not a good sign. Luckily, he's the ex-president of the United States. I know some of you might disagree, but, he would dismiss global warming. And that is dangerous, and it's dangerous for the world. So over the last 20 years, it seems that these super cold thunderstorms are becoming a little bit more common. It's an interesting part of the world that tropospheres actually get warmer, so we might expect to see warmer clouds, not colder clouds, which likely means we're seeing more extreme storms as we're getting even bigger overshoots than we're used to. Oh, look, it's a satellite. Now, this particular satellite is the NOAA 20. It's an American low-orbiting satellite that feeds data into weather forecasts. That's a pretty high-tech bit of kit, isn't it? God. Now, there's a little story about this, actually. I know I'm going to slightly digress. A friend of mine who died about 2 years ago. Oh, yeah, he was about 80-odd. Anyway, he worked for, he worked for NASA via a UK company. And he was one of the very first people he was in charge of the department that brought you satellite imaging. Literally. And his very first images he produced was with a dot matrix printer. You know those little pins, dot matrix printer. And he had on his display, he had to present this image to NASA. And this image was made up of loads of bits of paper stuck together with sellotape because it only had an A4 printer. And now look where we are. It's amazing, absolutely amazing. Technology in the right hands is fantastic. We just got to use it for the right reasons. The meteorological agencies are aware that not all the satellite sensors they fly today are capable of measuring the extreme low temperatures recorded by NOAA 20's visible infrared imaging radiometer. Ha, get that in the end. VIIRS. Improved capability is therefore necessary, especially since the American spacecraft on that day probably didn't capture the absolute low temperature reached in the cloud tops. It could have been lower than minus 111. It flew over at 3 o'clock and the peak of activity was about 4:30. So there you go. This is quite. It might feel it's a bit lame, isn't it? But actually, this is actually really serious. We are talking about extremes of weather that's going to be affecting people's lives. Extreme weather provides you with more flooding, and flooding takes lives and takes homes. Extremes of weather causes forest fires. because it's too dry. You know, it's just, this is a concern, and we all have to do our best to, mitigate our previous actions. And all too often do I see too many people still doing the wrong thing. We need to behave in a practical, environmental way. And I'm not talking about going around hugging trees and stuff like that. I admire these people who want to do it, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about each individual one of us doing the right thing. When we buy something, we have to ask ourselves, do we really need it? And when we get a waste product from that thing, we got to ask ourselves, what are we going to do with it now? We don't just chuck it in the bin. It's not always the answer. Even recycling isn't always the answer. I, for one, have witnessed recycling on a Friday because it's the end of the week and they want to restart fresh on a Monday, just going straight into landfill. Not great. And also, we have to understand that recycling is not really the right... Well, it's right to do it. It's our only option. While it's the only option, it's the right thing to do. But it takes energy. Glass, for instance, you've got to melt it to 3,000 or 4,000 degrees Celsius to get it to melt. So you can reuse it. And then you get a lot of sludge. There's always byproducts. There's always waste. So, yeah, we just have to do the right thing, don't we? Anyway, thank you for watching. And if you leave a comment below, I always reply to my comments and I read every single one of them. Anyway, this is a very young channel, so there isn't many comments. It's literally just a few months old and I haven't done much with it of late. So, if you're most kind, don't forget to click like and subscribe. And if you want to support us, you can do so via Patreon or you can buy us a coffee. Because as you're probably aware, I make no money. And I have to live. Keep the wolf from the door. Anyway, thank you for watching and please come back soon.